Welcome to the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature top founders and entrepreneurs and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Matthew Connor here, host of the Cyber Business Podcast, where we feature successful business leaders, authors, top law firms, green energy companies, and more. Today, we're joined by the CEO of BFG Financial Advisors and the author of Don't Retire, Graduate, Building a Path to Financial Freedom and Retirement at Any Age, Eric Brotman. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Matt. I'm so glad to be here. We're going to have some fun today.
I'm glad to have you, and I think we will. Before we get too far in, a quick word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. Do you know if a hacker's in your system? Most people and most companies don't until it's too late and the hacker's already done damage. A hacker's job is to bypass your security, so companies need a way of knowing when someone's gotten past their security. That's where CyberLink's intrusion detection comes in. With our 24/7 Security Operations Center, we monitor your computers, networks, and cloud accounts using a combination of AI and highly skilled cybersecurity technicians in real time to detect any signs of attack or intrusion. So if a bad guy gets past your security, we'll know right away and be able to kick them out. Find out more at cyberlinks.com. That's cyberlynx.com. And now back to our show. Eric, thanks for coming on the show today.
I'm ready to go. This is going to be great. Thanks, Matt.
All right, fantastic. So you started BFG Financial Advisors. Can you give us kind of the elevator pitch on BFG?
Sure. BFG Financial Advisors is a firm specializing in multigenerational financial planning. So we do financial planning and wealth management for folks at really every end of the economic spectrum. We're one of the few firms in the industry that doesn't have asset minimums and that has a relatable way for folks to really, we call it financial planning for all. It's really designed to help people raise their financial status and work toward financial independence. So the firm was started in 2003 as a brainchild. I had been in the industry for almost a decade and launched on my own. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about that. But today we have clients in almost all 50 states, represent families in every walk of life. And it's just a blessing to be able to do that.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, I think there's a lot to dive into there with BFG. But let me ask you, we do love founder stories. So how did BFG come to be?
Completely by accident. So, and what I mean by that is I didn't mean to be in this industry. I studied English, which most great financial advisors do. That's a little known fact. I studied English. I can quote late 18th century romantic poetry if you'd like, although that's a different topic than ours today. But I actually went into, I took my first job out of college at a brokerage firm in the legal department. And so like lots of English majors, the idea was either teaching or law school or something like that and communicating. And so I went to work in the legal department at a brokerage firm working with folks who usually were bereaved. Folks who had lost a loved one and needed to figure out what to do and how to get accounts to transition and those kinds of things. And I was finding that so many of these were wrong, Matt. They were really messed up. People didn't have beneficiaries, or they still had their ex-wife on their IRA, or they had named one of their kids and then they had more children but didn't name them. And there were all kinds of issues with beneficiaries and asset titling and stupid little things that if you had done them properly, this could have been less traumatic. And, instead you've ruined Thanksgiving for the next 3 generations of your family. And I realized on the legal side, I couldn't really help with that, but I loved the financial side. So I took a gig, as young people do, trying to get into this business. I spent 5 years in the life insurance industry because at that time, most of the brokerage firms wouldn't hire somebody 22 because they didn't have a network and a book of business and all of that. So I spent some time in the insurance business. I learned the estate planning. I earned my CFP credential and did all the different things that I needed to do to get educated, and then helped another more senior guy start a firm. And we actually launched 4 days after the market peaked after Y2K. So if you can imagine launching a company in March of 2000, just in time for the pro forma and all the MBA type stuff to go, tack in a handbasket immediately. We did it. We spent 4 years together. And the firm I was with decided that they were going to work almost exclusively with higher net worth clients, which made sense. It was the growth of the firm was going in that direction for the most senior person, but it wasn't my network. It wasn't. I was a young person. I wanted to work with folks across the spectrum, and so I launched BFG in 2003 as a way to reach more of a mass affluent market and less of a super rich market. And that doesn't mean we don't work with very highly successful, very wealthy people. It means that we don't only work with those people. And so it's been rewarding to have that. And I started it with one full-time and one part-time person. And I borrowed money from everywhere. And I'm sure you've had other bootstrapping conversations on your show, Matt, but I literally borrowed money from everywhere because no bank would talk to me. You know, they'll lend you $500,000 to get your degree in college with no collateral at all. But if you have a business plan, they won't talk to you until you have 2 years of tax returns. Yeah. That is the goofiest thing ever. However, so I had to borrow money. I borrowed money from a lot of places. The most critical was from my life insurance. And so I learned that life insurance was an asset that actually helped me create an enormous amount of wealth, and I was glad to have that. But I borrowed against credit cards because that's always a great place to get capital for the long term.
I bet, yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, Visa loved me for a short period of time. I borrowed against my home, of course, the home equity line. I borrowed from my mom. Now, you don't know my mom, but as loan sharks go, she's a tough cookie. So I paid her back first because if you don't keep good credit there, you are doomed. But no, I borrowed from everywhere and really had an idea and took office space and actually had a subtenant. It was a small office. It was such a small office that we had somebody sitting in the room with the servers and the chillers who had to like wear a winter coat to work because we had the server room as cold as it needed to be back in those days.
Yeah.
I mean, we were on top of each other, but we launched with a total of $6 million under client management, which, as you can imagine, is not paying the bills.
Right.
And, you know, you fast forward today, we have done 2 acquisitions. We bought a company in Cincinnati, Ohio. We had another senior level person join us from another firm here locally in Maryland. And we've developed a footprint and a model to groom young advisors where they don't have to be salespeople. They can be great advisors. And so we've created a career track. We now have 20 full-time people, 6 advisors, 3 of whom have been with us since they were college interns. Wow. And who have grown and never had to cold call or ask their friends to buy something. You know, it's not a sales job. It's a know your stuff, get your education, take incredible care of families, and abundance will follow. And so we've sort of created something different. And, you know, I've had folks apply for jobs here saying this job doesn't exist. So either you're full of it or this is really the unicorn I've been seeking. And it makes us a very desirable place for folks to come work, which is kind of nice.
That's fantastic. So when you say they've never had to do any cold calling or anything like that, so how did you go from struggling with 6 million under management and not being able to pay the bills to where you are now? Was, you know, that transition sounds painful and difficult. And I'm just kind of curious, what was the secret to your success there?
The secret was never asking anyone, any friend, to buy anything from me ever. I did 3 things as a young person. And remember, this is the early to mid 90s. So this is not, there was no internet, there was no LinkedIn, there was no, you know, there was no cell phones. So I did 3 things. I learned a seminar and I learned the IRA versus Roth IRA conversation and sort of how to maximize certain tax planning. I learned a basic seminar and I found at the time there were bookstores, you know, of the Barnes and Noble, Bibelo type of thing, and they would host speakers. And so I found a bookstore locally that was willing to promote me in their circular, which was then physical and being mailed out. Mm-hmm. They would promote me in their circular and say, we have a guest speaker talking about retirement plans and come check it out. And the only thing I had to do, because they set up the room, the AV, the invites, they did everything. All I had to do was make sure that there were 6 books on their shelves on the topic that people could pick up. Because it was drawing crowd into their space. So it was a free way to market a seminar. Some of those folks are still with us 20, almost 30 years later. The other thing I did is I worked trade shows. And at first, I was trying to do a booth. Now, doing a booth at a trade show is the most thankless, horrible thing ever, because you're literally begging someone to come talk to you while you're sitting there. So I learned quickly not to do the booth, but to just visit them and to work the room and network with other people. I actually was not what the trade shows wanted necessarily, because I wasn't paying for the expensive stuff, but I was there and I was shaking hands, many of whom were captive audiences and were excited to talk to anybody, no matter what it was about. So I did trade shows. And then lastly was networking groups. And that sounds simple now. We all do that. But at the time, I joined every organization I could be a part of. Chambers of commerce and business associations and local networks. And I got on every membership committee. Because when you're on a membership committee of a networking group, one of the first things you do is greet new members. Hi, welcome to the such and such county chamber of commerce. My name is Eric. Here's some tchotchkes from some of our members. This is how you get on a committee or get involved. And by the way, I'm a financial advisor and would love to chat with you. And so those were the three things. It was seminars and workshops, it was trade shows, and it was networking groups. And none of it was heavy sales. It was just meeting a lot of people and having folks at the grocery store go, "Hey, you're that guy. I know you."
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because at the end of the day, people don't buy based off of a product or service. They're really buying a relationship.
Mhm.
And so I think I've had this the same challenge. So I run an IT and cybersecurity company, and I had this challenge initially where I was like, look, people aren't going to buy, like, because IT is so paramount to your company. It's their lifeblood. I mean, if you lose all their data and all their everything, you've killed the company.
Mhm.
So I don't think you could. I think it's a hard sell to cold call or send them some cold email or some flyer, send them some trinket in the mail, and then be like, "Oh, hey, you gave us a mouse pad. Why don't you come handle our?"
Right.
Really?
Right.
I don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no.
I've
No.
always thought it's got to be relationship. I mean, it's
Yep.
always and I think that I've found that to be the case. It has been all referral. It's always just based off of a relationship. For me, the thing I think I really love about what you said was you did a seminar back in the day. Did you then go and make that why do I want to say webcast when that is not the word?
No, it didn't exist.
Yeah, but did you take that to the web?
There was no web.
No, I mean later.
No.
So
I mean, during in the last 20 years, we've done a lot of different kinds of media. I've been on Sunday morning news here on NBC locally as the financial guy off and on for a decade. I hosted a podcast for 5 years, which was fantastic, called Don't Retire, Graduate. I've published 3 books. We have a lot of online courses and other free resources out there that we're trying to educate people. And I do a lot of public speaking. So now we're sort of everywhere.
Mhm.
But most of it isn't canned. Most of it is live webinar type stuff where we're just having relatable conversations and people can ask me questions. I mean, so many folks think they can't afford a financial advisor or that, oh, that's only for these other folks. And it simply doesn't have to be that way. And so we've made a real push to get help to people who want to seek it. And it's funny, you mentioned the IT space. Everybody needs what you do. Everybody. We have to have what you do. But nobody wants to talk about it. So think about it like a necessary evil. It's like if you're selling car insurance, we all have to have it. None of us are excited to brag about our car insurance or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But you have to have it. And so as long as that's true, the real question to me is when something goes wrong, who do you want to call and who's got your back? Who's your advocate? And I'm certain that that is the message, not only in cyber, but for us in financial. To say to a couple, if one of you doesn't wake up tomorrow morning and one of you has to make a call and your whole life has just changed, who do you want to call? And if the answer is us, then let's make sure you're ready and we've done our part.
Wow.
Because the rest of it is just a commodity. There's nothing we do. We're not neurosurgeons.
Yep.
There's nothing I do that you can't do for yourself. If you have the time and the interest and the inclination, maybe I'll do some of it better than you will because of various levels of education, or maybe I won't. Some of it I can't control at all. What the economy does, the market does, heaven forbid what the government does, we can't control any of it. What we can do, though, is help with 30 years of experience of saying, this is what we've seen other families go through. We've seen good and bad markets, good and bad economies, high and low interest rates, housing bubbles, tech bubbles, whatever we've seen it, we've navigated it, and then we've helped people through the big events in life. Because let's face it, when you're talking about finance, first of all, most people don't like to talk about money anyway. It's taboo at the dinner table. Families sometimes don't want to talk about it. There are people who are incredibly wealthy who are embarrassed at how much money they have. There are people who are not incredibly wealthy who are embarrassed at how little money they have. There's more baggage around this. I feel like sometimes I'm more of a trainer in the gym or a nutritionist. No one wants to talk about their caloric intake, Matt.
It's true.
Just like nobody wants to say, this is what I spent at Nordstrom's last month. You got me. Nobody wants to do that. And so we don't put anybody on a budget, just like we wouldn't tell somebody to go on a diet. It's like, how do we make sure that you're doing the important things right, that you've dug the moat around your castle, which is a big chunk of the message in the book is make sure that you're reasonably bulletproof financially. But how do we make sure that you protect what you've built, that you continue to build it, and that you have a lifetime of abundance so that work is optional someday? Not so you can sit on the couch and watch daytime TV and eat potato chips, but so that you have the freedom to do whatever you want because you've reached that point.
I really like that. And I think, I got to, transitioning to the book here, which I think is just, was really fantastic. I love how you kind of broke it up and took that, don't retire, graduate analogy, and you take it semester by semester.
Yeah.
I thought that was great. It's such a fun, kind of easy and important read. So I think it speaks to a very large audience, and I think everybody will have a really nice time. So kudos on that. I want to say,
thank you.
We end up. It's funny because I didn't used to be a big reader. It was only like self-help books and then like tech stuff is the only thing I'd read. Whereas my wife, she reads like a mile a minute. I mean, it's insane how fast you read. I'm like, what? I'm more I study everything. I'm checking for grammar, which is silly.
Well,
I don't.
Hopefully you didn't find any of those mistakes.
No,
we
you
were pretty careful.
Great. So whoever your editor
the English
was.
major paid off. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Whew. That was a close one.
Yeah. Wow. It wasn't an iambic pentameter or anything, but it flowed.
I love it. So let me ask you, you talk about in the book, reframing the concept of retirement, from like, I think you said retreat to advancement and then the psychological and the social aspect of it. And I think that's really, really interesting because I've had this discussion a lot with a lot of people just sitting around having a drink, talking at dinners. Some people cannot wait to retire and they have this plan of, playing golf. They have this plan. They've got this vacation home where they're going to move to. Some people, myself included, can't even imagine a day where I'm not, working on my business. And it doesn't make sense to me. And so I'm kind of curious, kind of your take on it. And you would.
I think retirement in the traditional sense is absolutely horrible for you. I would refer to it as a fate worse than death because it literally is a retreat, a surrender, and a disappearance. If you're on LinkedIn, I use this example a lot. If you're on LinkedIn and you're flipping through and you want to meet some new people and network with some new people, and one of them says, Joe Smith retired, you are not clicking to meet Joe Smith. There is nothing interesting about Joe. Now, Joe might be a volunteer at the local food bank. He might be a father and a grandfather. He might be a world traveler. He might be a foodie. But all you know is he doesn't work. And so there are more ways to define ourselves than by what we do. And it's not uniquely American, but it's particularly bad in the US. When you ask somebody who they are, the first thing they say is, I'm an architect.
Yeah.
Well, no, who are you? That's what you do all day. That's your day job. But who are you? What are you about? And there's so many roles that we play. You're a husband, you're a father, maybe you're a churchgoer, maybe you're a sports fan, maybe you're a golf nut. Whatever it is, you're a lot of things. You're not just an architect. And it's important to do that right away, because if you don't, when the day comes that you can't do architecture anymore, either because your firm goes out of business or because you're ill and can't do it anymore, or because you've just hit 65 or 70 or whatever arbitrary number you want to use and you're done, you've lost your identity. Now, who are you? I used to be an architect. Cool, let's party. No, it's not. It's not how it goes. So I think, and there's not enough golf. There's not enough golf courses. Sorry, guys, there's not enough golf courses.
There are not.
And living in your vacation home, which, by the way, I have a vacation home, which I absolutely love, and I can't wait to get there. But if I was living there, I'd be bored out of my mind.
Right.
and so there's got to be something we're moving towards that's meaningful. It doesn't necessarily have to be for money. If you've reached financial independence and you don't need the money and you want to volunteer or you want to coach or mentor or teach or do whatever, that's great. If you want to do consulting, if you want to stay in your industry, but in more of a peripheral way, if you want to keep ownership of your business or some portion of your business, but you want to have somebody else run it day to day, there are ways to do that. There's no reason to do nothing unless you physically or cognitively can't.
Yeah. And I think that's really the key because, I don't think people are happy when they're not advancing in something, when you're not learning something, when you're not growing, I just don't think, I don't think I've never seen somebody who is, it's kind of that pursuit of happiness versus pleasure thing. Like, happiness means you're working towards goals and you're growing as an individual and that, just as you're saying, could be in any capacity. I mean, it could be as a pickleballer, could be as a golfer, could be as a library volunteer, whatever it is, or as an architect. Great, but you're growing, and that challenge, that's something that you enjoy that gets you up every day, versus that pursuit of happiness or that pleasure where, I don't know, does that lead you to cocaine? I mean, just like, and
that's a different retirement plan than mine, but to all their own.
To each their own. Yeah, I'm not judging.
I'm judging no one. It's a short retirement plan.
It is to go out in a blaze of glory. Good for you, buddy. Well, I don't know how we transition from that, but
I blame you, Matt, candidly.
That is on me.
No, but at the end of the day, you're right. It's about finding something that gets you. You said it. Gets you out of bed every morning. People who don't have a reason to get out of bed every morning start sleeping later and later and later. That doesn't mean you have to get up at 4:30 in the morning and go to the gym. I don't do that now. And I can't imagine I'm not doing that tomorrow. However, if you see the people who don't have something to do the next day, who sleep until 8 or 9 or 10 or 11, and then they don't get dressed and they're in their pajamas all day watching daytime TV. Their big event is, what am I having for dinner? And I just think that is sitting around waiting to die. That's horrible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, it's funny because, even just talking about the dress, like in my field, it's commonplace for people not to dress well. In fact, it's the hoodie, the t-shirt, and that's what's expected. Oh, you're a geek. You're supposed to dress that way. And the interesting part is, I don't think that's the case. So as soon as I started dressing, even though might be at my home office and I get up in the morning, I put on, a suit, I feel more professional. And I'm dressed for the day. When I was in the Army, putting on the uniform, the funny part was putting on those boots. This day, if I put on those boots, I feel like I can do anything because we did anything in those, and so it's part of that uniform of what are you going to do? So if you wake up and you don't put on anything and you just kind of, throw on some sweats and lay on the couch. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a waiting to die type deal, and no fun in that.
It's funny from a clothing standpoint. I've gone in the opposite direction. I used to be suits and ties and pocket squares and cufflinks, and I looked fancy. And what I really did was spend more on clothes than I needed to, and make people feel like maybe they weren't, that they shouldn't be talking to me. Like, I actually have gone the other direction. I don't wear a tie anymore. I rarely wear a suit. If I'm at a funeral, probably depends who it is, Matt. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I've gone much more casual, not sloppy, but much more casual because I think it's more relatable. It's more comfortable.
It's approachable. Yeah.
There's so much psychology, and finance is such a taboo topic. You wouldn't want your doctor in a hoodie, but you might not also want your doctor in a suit and tie either. You know what I mean? Right. Like, you want somebody who you feel like you can talk to, who makes you comfortable, but who is professional. Obviously, you want somebody who inspires confidence. Yeah. But also who doesn't make you feel like, oh, I can't come here looking like that. Like, you ever walk into a restaurant where you're slightly underdressed and you feel a little uncomfortable? I remember in college, I was with a fraternity brother. I was with a bunch of fraternity brothers in Mexico. I'm not telling that story on your show. However,
please do.
No, absolutely not. We already went down that road. I'm not doing it. But we got stuck in what was a major East Coast snowstorm that shut down airports from Atlanta to Maine. And we were trying to get back to Pennsylvania at the time, and there was no shot. And I had a bunch of guys who were going to be sleeping in an airport. I said, I'm not sleeping in a Mexican airport. I will find a flight to the States. So two of us said, we're doing this. And we flew to Tampa, and we wound up having one of the greatest 3-4 days. It's the kind of thing. So Tampa, Orlando, St. Pete. In order to get home, we had to go to Columbus and then Newark, New Jersey. Like, it was a ridiculous planes, trains, and automobiles kind of trip. However, when we got to Tampa, the first thing we said is we got to eat something. And we're in like sweatshirts. We've been rained on. We were in an airport overnight, and we walk into this place, and there's a maitre d'. And I remember vividly, I was at 20 years old, and I said to him, I realize we look more like we're here to hold up the place than to dine. Is there someplace nearby a little more casual? And he laughed, and it was good. And we didn't eat there, actually. But my point is, you don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. It's really important not to do that.
Yeah, no. And not to kind of get derailed here, but it's funny how much psychology there is in that, in the what you wear. And it's funny. I have a friend who was in a construction business, and he was doing very well, and he got himself a Rolex, and he loved his Rolex, and then he found that it was just a bad look. He couldn't go in and bid for a job, as a construction guy, sporting his Rolex, because then it's like, oh, you know what, I'm going to overpay for these, for this, to get him another Rolex, and so he was losing jobs. So he had to sell his watch, because of the psychology of it. So it's funny stuff.
I've been there. I wore a nice watch for a long time, and now I wear the Apple Watch or whatever, and it's actually more useful because I used to have a nice watch and a Fitbit, because that made a lot of sense. But it does turn people off. It's like somebody looks at you, oh, good year. The same thing's true with your office. We're in a business where a lot of financial advisors think it's important to have an office that looks ornate. And I would argue it's just the opposite. You want it to look more like somebody's living room than a boardroom, because it is so uncomfortable to be in a stuffy environment and feel like you have to be a certain way. You want to be yourself. You want to sit back in a comfortable chair. And I'm not saying it has to be sloppy. Again, it has to be nice, but no one should walk in and go, well, clearly my business is going to be the next piece of art on the wall. It's just not sensible. And I think that's true about so many things. The watch is funny. It's funny. I got some great advice early in my career from a very successful guy. I was up in Massachusetts. I was a year in the business, and he said, can I give you some advice without hurting your feelings? Ooh. I'm 23 years old, but I'm Gen X. We're tougher than that. So I was like, sure. I was like, bring it at me. He goes, I'm going to give you 2 pieces of advice, and if you follow them, you'll be more successful than you are headed toward right now as a new guy. Like, you've got 2 pieces of advice? Tell me what they are. Yeah. He goes, number 1, don't ever wear your class ring again. You look like somebody's grandkid. I was proud. I had graduated. I had great advice. I never wore it again. Yep. Second thing was, he said, build an organization of other young professionals who do different things than you do, learn from each other, and grow so that you'll have that network when you're older. You don't have to be a mastermind to figure that out. And he said it nonchalantly. So I created a group in 1995 called Mastermind. I wish I had trademarked it, because now it's like a thing. So technically, I think I had it first. Anyway, he gave me that idea. It was unbelievable. And this group of people came together, and we're now the dearest friends. We came together as a young professionals group. We're still professionals. We are not young anymore by any reasonable measure. However, now we get together quarterly, and we get together for dinner, and we catch up, and we talk about life and kids and family and humanity. But at the time, we were talking about the nuts and bolts of what we did in the mortgage business, or insurance, or real estate, or finance, or law, or accounting. And we learned from each other, because I was always jealous of the professionals who were 30 years my seniors. And, I've been working with this person for 25 years. She'll take great care of you. And I couldn't say that. I didn't have that. And I couldn't fake it, clearly. So I had to create it. And I think for young people who do that, whether it's something you join that already exists, or whether you just put it together for yourself, having stakeholder groups makes so much of a difference. So I believe in executive dialogues and masterminds with different industries. I believe in study groups. I'm in study groups with other financial advisors, where we are competition, but we're not. We're strategic alliances. I mean, I just don't think that there's blood in the water everywhere. It doesn't have to be. We have an advisory board, on which we invite clients to serve a 3-year term as board members, and they tell us what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. It's not a wine and dine kind of thing. It's a legitimate meeting, and twice a year we have them help us with everything from marketing and messaging to business operations to the client experience.
That's an awesome idea.
It's a big deal.
Wow, that's an awesome idea. I've never heard that before, and I think it's absolutely, and maybe it's just a gap in my knowledge, but I think that's absolutely mind-blowingly awesome. An advisory board of clients on what are we doing well, what can we do better, the good, bad, the ugly. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So we launched that in 2008, which, if you remember 2008 at all,
yeah, that's a great year.
We launched it just in time to have to be like, oh my God, how are we doing? Are we okay? And they're not all clients necessarily, although most are. Some of them are ancillary advisors we work with. Mm-hmm. So an attorney we do a bunch of work with mutual clients or something like that. But we've now had this advisory board in place for 16 years. And we have criteria for what we're looking for in board members. We have a board that is typically between 15 and 18 people. We have one dinner meeting a year. We're very transparent with them. We have one dinner meeting a year, and then we used to do 2 meetings a year. Now, instead, we do focus groups because we realized a group of 15 to 18, some people will be less comfortable speaking up, but they'll be more likely to roll their sleeves up and tell you what they think in a room with 5 or 6 people. So we broke them into groups with affinities. So we have a business development and marketing group, we have a client engagement group, and we have an operational group, and they come from different walks of life. They're in all different industries, and they know everybody, and they know all kinds of things, and they want to help us. And we've very rarely had somebody say, no, thank you, I don't want to serve. Once or twice in 16 years, but most of the time it's like, oh my gosh, I'd be delighted. And it's been a huge source, not only of business opportunities, but of incredible advice. I'll give you one example. We had back in, 2011, 2012, something like that, we thought, we're a company that's almost 10 years old and we don't have a brochure. We have no physical deliverable. Here's something. So we started working on it, and man, we wordsmithed this thing. I used my English major. We were ready to go. Man, this is beautiful. I can't wait. And we had 500 of them printed, and we took them to the advisory board meeting. We handed them out and said, what do you think? And every human in that room said they're crap. And we were like, huh? They said, we get 4 of these in the mail every week from different people. There's nothing in here uniquely yours. You sound like everybody else. And at the end of the day, we took them and threw them in a dumpster, and they never saw the light of day. And they protected us from looking like everybody else. And what cost us a few $100 in printing saved us, God knows what, in good advice.
Wow.
And so, when we have these situations, whether it's a pricing change, whether it's a staffing change, whether it's an office move, whether it's a change of strategy or business line, we now have folks we can ask, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this? And they'll tell us, because we've told them, you're not going to hurt our feelings, or if you do, that's on us. But we're not here just to hear how terrific we are. That's not helpful. What's helpful is where can we be better or more effective? And giving people permission to say, I like this, this, and this, but your online access is garbage. We got more complaints. Clients hated the fact that we had 3 different online systems to go for 3 different things. We had one for statements and confirmations, we had one for performance reporting, and we had one for online access to a vault to share documents in a cybersecurity free way. So, and they hated it. They're like, we never know which one to go to for this or that or the other thing. Can you just fix it? And our board told us this, and so we put together a plan, and we found the right vendor, and we put together a plan that allowed us to unify it into one set. And they're all like, this is the best thing ever. Well, we would never have thought of that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Wow. I think what's really, obviously, I'm kind of, in awe of this idea. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And I think the fun part for me is, I get to interview a lot of really great, business professionals and entrepreneurs, and you hear bits and pieces of stuff. And so for me, it's all kind of coming together, and it's just, if nothing else, this podcast has been like the like my own personal, like educational system. I'm learning from all these great people just by having these really cool conversations.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think you've brought so many things together when it comes to the relationships and kind of building that out and your kind of network group. So I wanted to go back to that for a second.
Sure.
Where I think, your mastermind, were these, when you first did this, was this like, hey, I'm going to need estate planning attorneys because that would be good for me to be in with them and them in with me. We can kind of, it's mutually beneficial. Obviously, there's a symbiotic relationship there. Was that how you started your mastermind?
You're going to love this story. You're going to love this story because this is absolutely what happened. I wanted to start with an attorney, and I wasn't sure whether it was going to be a state or corporate, but I knew I wanted to have legal representation and so forth. And so I sent 1,200 letters, physical letters, to 1,200 attorneys in the Baltimore metro area. And I said, I've got an idea. I'd like to take you to lunch. Can I pick your brain? And I had 60 people out of 1,200 say yes. I took 60 lawyers to lunch. Sounds like a joke waiting to happen. There's no punchline. But there were days where I met 3 of them for lunch the same day at the same place. So I'd have an 11:30, a 12:45, and a 2 o'clock. And like I had soup with one and salad with the other. I gained a little weight on this that week. However, I found the person that I wanted who shared this idea. And we then launched a kickoff where we went through sort of his virtual Rolodex and mine and said, what are the industries we want? Who are the people we want to invite? And we invited them to a kickoff. And we had what was essentially a light fare dinner meeting where we invited folks to what was then my office. And I think we had 25 or 30 people show up, and we had sandwiches. It was nothing fancy. And we said, here's our idea. And what do you think? And we wound up at the time having about 12 folks who said, yeah, this sounds very, very cool. And they were all different. And what we did was we had everybody write down a list of the things that they were adroit enough about to speak on, things that they could teach others, and also a list of things that they'd like to learn from others. And then we married those 12 sheets of paper, and we came up with monthly topics. And we said, these 1 or 2 people are going to speak in January on this, and these 2 are going to speak in February on this. And we educated each other on the things we wanted to learn while learning about our businesses. And it was the simplest way to learn a lot of things from good people. And I made lifelong friends out of that. And people came and went over years. I mean, some of it is geography, some of it is just need or desire, but there's a core of us who now when we get together, it's not a business meeting anymore. Now it's like dear friends who just, after all this time, we're rooting for each other, but and we've done business together, certainly, but it's no longer a formal, there's no agenda now. Now it's just, these are people who have been in each other's weddings.
Well, I mean, you took that whole, that the fact that your friends, who your close friends are, is who you're going to become, right? Show me your 5 closest friends. I'll show you who you're going to be in 5 years.
Oh my gosh, I'm a degenerate. I hope they hear this show. You know who you are. Sorry, Matt. Yeah. I had to. I couldn't help
it. What? That's fair. And I'm sure they're going to appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. They know who they are.
And they know they are.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So, but you're now hanging out with other successful business, minded people.
Yeah.
And now you're learning from each other. So let me ask you, so it's been what, 20 plus years of that, almost 30?
Almost 30. Yeah.
Almost 30 years. How has that played out for the whole group? 30 years later. Gosh. Everybody is, wildly far more successful than
massively successful. The attorney we worked with in that group, the one I had identified, wound up being one of the most successful attorneys in this geographic area, and represented Bank of America during the 2008, 2009 billion-dollar bailouts, like crazy national big. These folks from all of us had humble beginnings, quite frankly. But we had an unbelievable support network, advocates and allies and friends, and have gone on to do just amazing things. One of the folks in our groups, it's interesting because when I started the group, I had told you I was working for an insurance company. So I was the life insurance guy in the group. And then there was a financial advisor who at the time worked for Dean Witter, which is 7 firms removed from that, but worked at a brokerage firm. And she was the only woman in her office, and she was dynamic and fantastic. And so we were working together, and I actually wound up going toward my CFP. And of course, when Sandy Weil broke down the walls between investments, insurance, and banking, it meant we all did everything, and that happened in the late 90s. So as a result, she and I became, on paper, direct competitors. And we talked about this. We said, well, we're both sort of doing some of the same stuff. What do you want to do? And she's like, we're in this together. Let's just do it. And so we're still in that group. She's one of the most successful female financial advisors I've ever known. And in fact, our company now has more women in executive positions. We're winning all kinds of awards. And this woman's not in that group. But we have these incredible women in our office. The president and COO of our firm is a woman who's been in the business 20 plus years. She's my successor waiting to happen. We have a different makeup of our team. And some of it is because of that relationship. I'll give you another funny story, Matt, because I'm really having fun with this. But that woman who worked for Dean Witter at the time invited me to something called the Executive Women's Network of Baltimore. 1995. I'm 23 years old. The executive, I said, I can't go to that. She goes, I don't think there's any rules against you coming. It's a networking thing. So I go to this event at a big watering hole downtown. And there's 400 people there. I'm the only guy. Mm-hmm. And I walk in and I'm like looking around like, what am I doing here? And I didn't get that whole night. I don't think I got 20 feet inside the front door because people were coming up to me. I must have known 60 people there from different walks of life who I had no idea communicated. Because this is such a small town. We knew each other from this organization or from that place or from this school or from wherever. It turned out that I was asked to join the organization. I became the only male member of the Executive Women's Network of Baltimore as a 23-year-old guy. I then was asked to serve on the board. I chaired the corporate membership committee and raised and found corporate sponsors for the organization. And I'd be randomly at the bagel shop one day and people go, you're that guy. I'm like, yes, I am. I'm that guy. I was known as that guy. But I can track so much of my success to that experience.
Really?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I learned how women do business differently than men. And I don't mean superficially. I mean, it's different. And I can give you a chapter and verse.
I'd like to explore that.
Yeah, no, it is a different. We have, as a species, we have screwed this up badly as gentlemen. Mm-hmm. They do business very differently and much better. And I think make much better financial advisors than men do. Mm-hmm. And so we've been champions of that. But serving on that board, I started to get a feeling of what it was like to be the minority, to be the one in the room who was different. That was an important thing that as a white guy, I never really got to experience, Yeah. There were people on that board who did not want me there. That was a new experience. And it was simply because of gender. But there were people. And so that was an experience and something I had to navigate a little bit. But women are different. I could walk into your office. If I was, let's say I was in the retirement plan business and I was doing 401ks, which I do not do. I do family stuff. But let's say I was, and I came to you and I said, Matt, you have X number of employees. You have to have a retirement plan. You have to do that. And here's the way you do a profit sharing. And I could bang on your desk and say, you're an idiot if you don't do this. And you might very well go, oh yeah, all right, no problem. If I did that in a woman's office, I would be invited to the door, and not in a short way, not in a pleasant way. It would be like, you just stormed the gates, get out of my office. You have to use a completely different approach. Women are much more loyal. They're much more relational. They are much more, they're much more likely to get the true story and the details. Guys will gloss right over that.
Yeah.
And if you ask somebody, tell me what's important to you about cybersecurity, you're not going to get a straight answer. Well, first of all, most people don't understand. They just want to know, can I check this box so I can tell everybody I've got it?
Yep.
But there will be some people, and I think there'll be more women, if you look at your clientele, who are more likely to be equally concentrating on how this would impact not only our company, but our employees and our clients and our relationships. And guys are like, I just got to check this box and move on.
Yep. 100%.
And that is a different, and it's not right or wrong.
No, it's just different.
You have to understand it's different.
Yeah. No, we see that all the time. And I think one of the things I kind of like and kind of, I think it was just kind of more of a natural fit, if you will. But a lot of our financial services clients, especially, the closer they get to the kind of the Wall Street, side of things, mm-hmm. they are very much that way. And at first I was like, oh, that's fast. And yes, they just want it checked. It's the ball's in your court. You take care of it. It's your responsibility. Boom. Great. And they want to be done and moving on. Very cool. On the other side of that spectrum, we have like female run counseling groups. Totally different. And their mindset is much more about the relationship, protecting everybody, making sure that things are done well. And it's a completely different mindset. Neither, as you said, neither one right or wrong, just very, very different way of approaching things. At the end, I've always told our guys, like, look, we are counselors first, therapists first, and then technicians. So, when people call up and they got a problem, you want to help them with their problem. You got to first address the emotional aspect of it, especially if it's something where they're very worried. Hey, I may have lost data. What's going on? And then you take care of the technical. But it's always about that relationship. So managing that very large spectrum, to your point, I think women are naturally very, very adroit at that, kind of emotional navigation, whereas men grew up, they tend to have grown up in an environment where they didn't have to manage and navigate a large, spectrum of emotions. It was, stop being a weenie, don't be a wuss, stop crying, and then it's just a tougher environment where you and your buddies, you make fun of each other and it's funny and you get a kick out of it. Girls, not so much. They can, it's a different world.
I just want to remind you that your show has now included the word weenie and cocaine in one episode, and that's not normally my MO, just for the record.
Everybody, my wife makes fun of me because as soon as if I have a drink and we're hanging out with at some point I will make a cocaine joke, invariably. However, this is coffee. I'm just saying that for her. It's coffee, so I've reached a new low.
All right. Well, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm glad your wife will approve of the show. Then call me later. We'll talk.
That's right.
Now, so let's dig into this a little bit, because I do think it's important to understand what financial advising, what it really is and what it isn't, because this comes back to the gender, the relationship, all the things you're talking about, and very much the book. It's very much less about transactional. How do I find the best growth fund, or what's the best? Where am I going to get the best return or the best interest rate? Of course, some of that matters a little bit, but it doesn't matter much. The much bigger thing is, am I okay if I get sick, or if I can't work or lose my job, or if something happens to one of my parents or one of my spouse's parents or one of our children, or what if we have triplets? Or what if we have an event, and some of them are tragic and some of them are opportunistic and wonderful, but it's when there are transition points in life that are very, very major that it's good to have somebody who really knows how it's going to impact you. These are not decisions financially, and I imagine it's true in the tech space too. They're not made in a vacuum. You're in a space where you could fix problem A and create problems B, C, D over there. Finance is the same way. You might say, I found the perfect solution for this account, but it no longer works well with these other things or with this other plan, or, hey, that's terrific, but you can't touch it and school starts in September. Like, there's so many different nuances to that. And so I think taking a very human approach and looking at it less quantitatively, the math is what it is. The math is the easy part. Now, I know some people hate math, and I get that, and I respect that. But for those people who do this for a living, the math is the easy part. The harder part is figuring out the psychology and the art of it, not the science of it. Financial planning is not a hard thing to do. It's a math problem.
Yeah.
But life isn't linear.
Yeah. Well, and you don't have like a clear, there is not a one size fits all, for you. And it's funny because it's funny how that applies, to IT and cybersecurity. Same deal. There's not a one size, as much as I would love for that to be the case. And I know you would too, be like, oh, you need package A. And that will be, boop, and now it doesn't work that way. No. Every business, every person is different. And I think the interesting part is you take all of this. If an individual goes at it themselves, and some people, as you said earlier, may they've really looked into it. Like, my wife is amazing at this. She went from zero financial, knowledge whatsoever when she got out of her first marriage, and she's a doctor, and she had married a doctor who took care of everything. And she didn't even have a bank account, didn't know anything about anything when she got divorced after 10 plus years, and didn't even really know how much money she was making. because he handled everything. And then, and to where now she has studied it all, right? So she went from one end of that spectrum to the other, and she's got everything down. She's hired the right people. She's got the right advice. She has just nailed it. I'm like, wow. But the interesting part is, if you do, some people will do that themselves, but they haven't seen all of the things, all of these different situations. Whereas when you get to a financial advisor, I think that the thing that a lot of people may miss is you get all of that experience. They have seen 100 or thousands of different scenarios and seen how it plays out, and they bring this experience to you. So when you go to it, you're learning it for the first time. When I learned something the first time doing it myself, I tend to make mistakes, or maybe don't get the best outcome. Whereas if I've got somebody helping me who advises me, oh look, that lead, I see where you're going with that, and this is where that leads. Shit, I didn't see that. Oh, that's a cliff there. Okay. Yeah. And can guide you down the right path. I think there's huge, there's a huge advantage there. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss when it's like, hey, I can do this on my own. I don't need an advisor. Maybe true.
I mean, there's nothing we do. We talked about this. There's nothing we do that you can't do yourself. Although I could do my own taxes too, and I wouldn't. I'd sooner give myself a root canal. There's just certain things I'm not messing with, like the IRS being one of them. And I just think there's certain things where leaning on someone's expertise will save you time and energy and heartache. And maybe you missed the big mistake. Maybe it's not about whether you've reached top speed on your cruise ship. Maybe it's about missing the iceberg.
Nice. That's fantastic. I love that. Yep. That's beautiful. I honestly, I think I could do this all day. And I think that's such a beautiful space to end in. I love that. That is such a nice thought. I can't thank you enough. I think we've covered a lot of ground here, and I don't know if this helped anybody else, but I've gotten some really great ideas. I think that your mastermind was a brilliant one. The advisory board is just spectacular. I mean, you hear about advisory boards, but again, I'm still blown away. You hear about advisory boards, but I think you've applied it in a different way. You hear about it from a large firm that they use an advisory. I get it. It's different when it's a small company and you're using it with clients. You've invited mostly clients to be advisors. Like, hey, it's brilliant, because a lot of times you just don't hear from your clients. You assume everything's good, or you check in on them. They're all happy and fine. Totally different than bringing them in and saying, hey, what do you think of this idea? What could we be doing better? Now you're getting the real scoop. They're actually invested and get freaking brilliant. So I love that.
Well, thank you. There's no way to know what it feels like for me to be a client of BFG's. I am one. My wife will come in and we'll sit down with one of the other advisors here, and it's as close to approximating it as it can be. But I know what's happening behind the curtain. There's no wizard. So I can't know what that really feels like. There's too much of an interaction there. So, I run, Matt, a consulting practice for financial advisors, and I teach financial advisors how to do some of the things we talked about on the show. And I, whether it's an advisory board or focus groups or running planning summits with your teams, and how to grow a practice, even how to build a podcast as a financial advisor, I'm having more fun doing consulting than I've ever had in my life. And by the way, when I graduate into retirement, that's what I'm going to be doing. That's just the plan. So if you have financial advisors listening to this show, I'm not your competition. I'm your strategic alliance, and be happy to work with you too.
Well, I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I know we've hit on it. I know I said we were kind of wrapping up there, but we've hit on it again. And I think that it's so important, that abundance mindset. I have the same thing in the IT and cybersecurity world. There are some people who just, they think that the pot is finite, the marketplace is finite, and it is just not. And if that's your mindset, that's fine. But now you live in a different world than I live in, because the reality is the opportunities are limitless. I could not possibly service, even here in the DC area. I can't service everybody in Bethesda alone, let alone the entire DC region, let alone the rest of the United States. It's just ridiculous. There's so many people, so many opportunities, so much it's just silly to look at things as finite. So totally agree. Now, before we go, can you tell everybody, Eric, where they can find out more about you, where they can get your book, more about BFG, more about even your consulting?
Sure. If you go to bfgfa.com, that's BFG's website. You can also go to brotmanmedia.com and learn about the podcast, buy the book. Of course, we're on Amazon and all the other online retailers as well. And then the consulting is at brotmanconsultinggroup.com. And we have a link tree you can get from one to the other. Our security, or not our security, but our internet connects all of that beautifully. So the websites link to each other. But whether it's that you're looking for financial advice as a business owner, as an executive, as a family, or whether you're looking for advice to grow your financial planning practice, we're here to help, and it's a ton of fun.
Well, Eric, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. This has been one of my favorite episodes yet.
Oh, thanks, Matt. It was great to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Cyber Business Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.